Hey guys, Wonton here, bringing you back another One Piece TCG tournament match. This time we have a Green Kid mirror match. My opponent chose to go first here, and personally, I also prefer going first in the mirror. I think just going first gives you an advantage in gaining board control since you do get the initial tempo, and board control is really how you win the mirror. But there are pros and cons to going first and second, and the pros of going second is that you do get to drop your 8 Dawn Kid on curve, like on turn 4, and sometimes it really is just the difference. Whoever can get their big 8 Dawn Kid down first. But going first, you do get the first shot at dropping your 7 Dawn Kid, which is sometimes just as good. Nothing too crazy here, just your standard Bonnie start. I'm not a big fan of holding onto her. I just use her because you already break even. Any additional activations, just extra. And here I really just wanted to fish for some mid game, early game tools. See, as you can see, I picked up Killer just because board control is so important in this matchup. He also just nothing fancy, just a beige and a Momo as well. Grabs an Izzo, same thing basically. And you see the other value of Bonnie is that he has to attack it because you just get too much value from leaving it up. So she also just eats up an attack. And here you can actually see I forgot to put down my life earlier. I don't know if it happens to you guys, but it happens to me all the time. And at least like a third of my games, I just forget to put my life down. Luckily, my opponent was pretty cool about it, really nice about it, and he just let me play it on. And here, nothing crazy, just mirroring what he's doing, getting rid of his Momo, can't leave him up too much value as well. And it's huge that I got to drop Okiku first, because whoever drops Okiku first has such a huge advantage in terms of board control. She's just so strong early, and she just denies him all the early to mid cards. And he has to be extra careful when playing them, and he needs to commit extra resources just to make sure Okiku gets off the board. Law is a really good card and pretty solid in the mirror. I personally don't run any in my deck because I try to tech mine very heavily against Red Zoro since a majority of my games at my locals is against Red Zoro. And so as a result, my deck is kind of curved a little bit lower. And I feel that sometimes Law kind of just sits in hand, doesn't even offer a counter. But other than that, against other matchups, he's a very good card. He's a solid body, he's a blocker, and he lets you protect your other cards or lets you reactivate them as well. Here I just fire off some ship damage towards his leader since we're eventually going to have to get him to 0 anyways. And I was pretty confident I could defend Okiku since I have a bunch of counters in my hand. If he decides to take a swing with Law, it exposes his own Law to my own attacks as well. And if he committed some Dawn to make sure that Okiku gets off the board, then I was fine with that too, since it'll just make his turn weaker, he'll have less Dawn to work with. I take a swing at Beige instead of his leader, since I'm not trying to rush him down or anything, I just want to make sure I maintain board control, and making sure that he doesn't have any blockers in the way. I drop a second Okiku, and at this point, my early game presence is so strong. These two just provide so much presence early and so much pressure that he has to deal with at least one of them first before he can really get anything going. He takes a swing at Okiku. Naturally, I'm gonna protect her. Now he tries to fish for an answer. And X Drake was a pretty huge pickup for him. If he didn't grab at least a killer or a Drake and knock out one of the Okikus, he would have been in trouble. He probably wouldn't be able to safely play anything from his hands, and he only had 5 Dawn left. And Okiku was just gonna rest whatever he dropped down. If there's only one thing to take away from this video today, is that Okiku is an absolutely busted card if you manage to get her to stick. Her only downside is she doesn't provide counter, but she's just so oppressive if you're able to protect her well, and she just starts swinging multiple times. And you can see how quickly I just slam down Kid here. Sometimes you don't need to think about it. Sometimes that's just the best play, especially when their board isn't super strong like here, and they're not threatening you with lethal or anything. With Kid, you don't always want to rest him immediately on that first turn. Sometimes you just want to leave him active to keep him safe. Especially like my board here, where I don't really have any blockers to protect him, not too confident in my counters in hand. And so you just want to let him stand that first turn, let him settle in, and watch him start pumping out value and pressure next turn. He takes out Okiku here, and as valuable as she is, I don't want to overprotect her since I want to save my counters for Kid, who is the real win condition here. He plays Law and the other Law, I guess. But again, I don't run him personally. I think he's pretty good in the mirror, but oftentimes against Red, he just doesn't do enough. He has a pretty decent sized board here now, but then in the face of 8 Dawn Kid, it's just gonna be a little bit harder for him to get back that board control, since I can just hide behind Kid, and on top of that, Kid just swings for 9,000 damage as well when you activate him. Yeah, just trying to clear up some more of his board. And at this point, I'm at a pretty safe spot. I can hide behind this Kid. And so I just decided to drop Hawkins, which I think is probably the second best card in this deck, even better than 7 Dawn Kid. He's gonna be the closest thing you have to board clear in this deck, and he's just such a strong card, especially in the mirror, since these are both beatdown decks. I dropped the killer, and he's there just to make sure I can protect the Kid in case I don't have the counters in hand to do so. Pretty self-explanatory here, just protecting our boy Kid. He leaves up 3 Dawn, probably to just protect his board with some event counters. He understands as well that board control is the name of the game here. Just using Hawkins's ability to just clear up some board space here. Hawkins is great when you pair him up with Izzo as well. You just knock out 2 of his characters. With the second blocker here, I was in such a strong state that he was slowly starting to lose control of the game, and I could afford to just sit back and just start slowly chipping away at his leader while my own leader and my other characters can just hide behind this Kid. He uses up a Punk Gibson to save the Law, and but I just have so much power on board that he's forced to use up another two cards just to counter my attack, just to protect Law. Since if Law was gone, his entire board would be gone, and he'd just be dead next turn. But now he has an even smaller hand size, which was just fine by me. He commits most of his Dawn here just to get rid of Kid, and honestly, I probably would have done the same thing if I was in his position too. There's no way there's no way he would have won this game as long as Kid was up. He needed to be dealt with one way or another. I don't know if you guys noticed though. I was okay with getting with this Kid going down just because I had another 8 Dawn Kid in hand as well. He actually did a pretty good job getting rid of my board. He got me down to just a Hawkins and an Izzo, and if I didn't have that second 8 Dawn Kid in my hand, who knows how this match would have played out, since he had one in his hand as well, just ready to drop if I didn't restabilize the board. But then again, I got so much value out of my Hawkins, so who knows really. And here comes my second kid. Funny enough, he told me he did have an 8 Dawn kid of his own in his hand the whole time, but he never found the time to safely play him since my board was so threatening most of the time. And that's the problem with Kid. He costs so much that he eats up your entire turn, and and if you don't rest him, he kind of just did nothing that turn. While if you do rest him and you don't have the proper protection for him, or if the enemy's board is too strong, then he just gets taken out so easily. So as strong as he is, you still do have to be a little bit careful when you play him. Like for example, Hawkins right here could just solo him by himself pretty easily. Neko was a pretty good pickup since he was able to bypass my beige here. And since my kid was not rested, he it left the rest of my characters open for attack. So Hawkins and Izzo were just exposed. At this point, my hand was also kind of low, so I didn't exactly have the counters to just keep Hawkins up as well. He did mention after that he probably should have swung at the Izzo rather than the beige as well, just to relieve a little bit of pressure off the board. But he was more concerned about the beige protecting the kid, just because kid is just so strong. Here I just start swinging for face, and I'm pretty confident in my board. I feel pretty secure, and I know that I can probably knock him out in the next few turns. I didn't want to overcommit with a double swing with my leader into his, just because I wasn't sure what he picked up from his life pool, and I didn't want to overextend and just end up throwing the game. So I just took the safer route and just knocked out his blocker with Drake. So on top of being another 6,000 body that he just has to take into account for with his low life, the very worst, another blocker is down. So if the worst case scenario happens, he somehow clears my board. I can just start swinging face with my leader too. And although I was in control for most of the game, he did such a good job of continuously refilling his board and continuously applying pressure that I still have to be careful, because he could have just wiped out my board and restabilized and taken control of the game just like that. It only takes like one turn, which is a thing, which is something I like about One Piece as well. That these games get so swingy sometimes. And as I was mentioning earlier, this is one of those matchups where you just want to drop down the kid as soon as possible, just fight aggressively early, and make sure it's safe for you to drop a kid. Kid was the real difference here. This was still a pretty close game, and the second kid was just proved to be too much for him. He eventually just finally runs out of steam here, and they just have too much power on the board, even for his two blockers, and I was just able to finish him off. I actually ended up finishing second this tournament, which was pretty nice. And I thought it was a pretty good green mirror match to show you guys as well. So thanks for watching, and if you guys want more One Piece content, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel below. If you guys have any questions or maybe some suggestions on how I could have played a little bit better, just leave them into the comment section down below as well. And until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.